Okay, so here's my news update. As was mentioned last week, after the summer break, I'm going to try and make them shorter than they were before. Although sometimes if a lot of stuff comes in, then I will mention them. And there are quite a few things this week. Okay, so if it's special, you can contact me, or if you want to do a quick couple of minutes on something that's happening in your area, let us know. Okay, so here's the thing. John Burke's always worth looking at Twitter. He picks up on what someone talks about with stopping smoking, and he says what finally pushed drivers to reduce their driving in cities was being denied access to public place when driving became maximally inconvenient. And he's relating that to smoking, which is of course different in many ways, but he is worth following if you're on Twitter, anybody. Okay, now, this was pretty horrible. Something from Department for Transport, a leaflet called Common Misconceptions About Electric Vehicles. It's a leaflet with various things where they try to do their myth busting. And the big myth bust they wanted to get into is the idea that electric vehicles are too expensive. And they actually took the trouble to do a special box saying it costs from only 1p per mile to charge up a new EV compared to around 10p per mile to fuel a new diesel or petrol vehicle. Like that's something which is good, okay? And government is still giving subsidy to purchase of electric vehicles, and in various other ways, it's promoting EVs as the solution. I'm very pleased that if any of you saw Newsnight a couple of nights ago, Ed Miliband was on really storming in there, demanding stuff on climate change. Emily Maitlis said, are we going to drive less? Don't you like EVs? And he said, yeah, we like EVs, but you can't just replace internal combustion engine vehicles with EVs. You need to have good public transport, walking and cycling. So he seems to get it. Lots of other people don't. And they're being promoted, and they are in that leaflet from the DFT. One other thing about that was that they didn't really say anything about disabilities at all, about problems for people with visual impairment for cables across the footway, that kind of thing. Here's a reminder of the cost of motoring. Here's what's happened over the last 10 years, this is. So bus and coach fares going up from the base of 0. Motoring is green right at the bottom, and it's gone up less, not just less than bus and coach fares, but less than average wages and cost of living. So motoring has become, in real terms, cheaper over the last 10 years. And that also brings me to a comment by Adam Reynolds today. The DFT's forecasting shows road mileage going up by 2050 by up by about at least a third from here. And he's saying that the Climate Change Commission requires a 34% reduction in road miles driven by 2050. I'm not quite sure where he got those figures from. I have tweeted him. The last I heard from Climate Change Commission was that they wanted a 9% reduction in car mileage, but that might have been by a date which is closer to us, like 2030. So that's just some stuff about EVs, or zero emission vehicles, as the department calls them in this graphic.
Want to jump in on that, or just put it in?
Who wants to jump in?
Adam Reynolds.
Oh, Adam, are you here? Yes.
Yes, sorry. Work's allowed me permission to find some time. They cancelled a load of meetings so I can make it. That was taken from the Forbes article that Carlton Reid did on the CCC report. The study for reduction thing, a lot of this is to do with energy usage within the system. And so if you take fossil fuels out of the system, you still need to replace it with some sort of energy source in terms of electric vehicles. And so, but what we're seeing here at the moment is that we're not increasing the amount of renewable energies that we're making. We're just replacing coal and gas systems that are failing, and in some cases nuclear systems as well. And so we're actually ending up as a very consistent level of power generation, even with renewables coming on board, but we're then removing fossil fuels from the system. So there is an absolute need in terms of from creating a low energy society to move away from this. But it is something deeply buried somewhere in the CCC report. I'm trying to get Carlton Reid to give me that.
Great. That'd be good. Yes, I've written on electric vehicles. Might do a little presentation at some stage. This point about the amount of energy, I'm not an energy specialist, but it's true that if you're having to find loads of new clean energy for battery electric vehicles or hydrogen to be processed and all the rest of it, you will have to take it away from priority areas like domestic use or industrial use or commercial use, whatever. So that's important. They do actually talk a little bit about it in that propaganda leaflet from department, but I still think it's a relevant issue. It'd be nice to hear from you when Carlton comes through with the stuff. Okay, so that's stuff about electric vehicles. Now, remember that article by George Monbiot from last week I mentioned. And also this Friday, there's the LCC's presentation webinar with Ralph Buhler and John Pucher, which I mentioned last week. There's also, don't forget, Cycling and Society Symposium. That's taking place on the 16th and 17th. You can get in contact with them off their website, cyclingandsociety.org. Myth busting video on cycle lanes from Cycling UK. You can have a quick look at that link. And also money for e-bikes. Get in touch with the Energy Saving Trust e-cargo grant funding. Now, your victim blaming for tonight. This is from Thames Valley Police, Roads Policing. Cyclists be bright, be seen, contrasting clothing. There's absolutely no evidence, no studies ever done on this. Pink for the summer. Now, I hope all you chaps were wearing pink this summer. It was the color. And yellow and is orange in it, or orange isn't supposed to be good because you're up against the autumnal reds or whatever. And they do two things. They say, take care and protect others. How exactly is wearing pink supposed to protect others? Please. And that graphic, I mean, why did they use that graphic? Please, you know, they're supposed to be, they're supposed to have loads of comms people around. Dear, oh dear, Thames Valley Police. And they also did another thing wrong, which was they went to the Cycle Fest to have a close pass display set up to demonstrate on how to share the road. Now, the point about policing close passing is that you have to back it, you have to do it actually on a widespread basis, let motorists know what's happening, and you also have to have enforcement with penalty points handed out and a lot of publicity. The last thing you need to do is to tell cyclists about it, to go to a cyclist open air event and stand around saying, look, this is what motorists should do. Cyclists already know this. Now, Mark Hodgson does actually take a display thing out, but he takes it out to Silverstone when there's lots of speed freak motorcyclists and motorists out there. He is doing stuff to get the message over to motorists. So thanks a lot, Thames Valley, but you weren't really addressing the right audience there. Yes, stuff from the Daily Telegraph. Some of this was by Bunny Guinness, the gardening expert. It's time to save the Great British Front Garden. And a new study has revealed that 12% of Brits had converted some of all of their front garden into a driveway. So they were up in arms about that, which they should be, but I don't think there was anything very much about how maybe we shouldn't have so many cars. Yeah, this was on the web. Retrofit Southwest can have video in motion, allows visual media as DVD TV to continue streaming to the vehicle's screens when the car is in motion. And there was a bit of toing and froing on Twitter, and it is illegal. And I think the police may be trying to get through to people. Not that it will stop all the various other modern dashboards on new cars coming out with loads and loads and loads of stuff to look at when you're driving. All right, from the UK. It was a letter written by various of the great and good people like Professor Adrian Davis, doctors and other health professionals, writing to City of Edinburgh Council, trying to keep infrastructure in for the benefit of people walking and cycling. Brighton, yes, there's going to be a Labour Party conference there. Labour walks and cycles will be out there and trying to get Labour councillors not to do what the Labour councillors in Brighton and Hove did. And Brighton and Hove cycling campaign said the cost of removing the temporary cycle lanes is going to be £75,000. And it'll be interesting to see what the FT does with regard to withdrawing or cutting back on future funding. All right, and this is quite good from Avon and Somerset Police. A nice graphic about third-party reporting. And I can tell you that something will be out nationally at the end of this month on what different police services do in terms of third-party reporting. Oh yeah, here's this came out from Greater Manchester, and you can have a nice look at that to work out exactly what is wrong with it, or you might even be able to find something that's right with it. I think someone said these could have been Dutch shark's teeth, but for Britain they're like are they the wrong way round, or what exactly is going on there? Is that supposed to stop, to get people to slow down when they're coming in off the road? Is that appropriate signage? Why is it in a V? Should there be tactile paving there, or should it be elsewhere? I leave it with you to discuss. Now over in London, and here's the protest which you've been hearing about. There's quite a good video of it. I counted 300 people cycling to it. It was an absolutely excellent piece of reporting on BBC News by Ross Lydall. So not Ross Lydall, who's the BBC News person? Forgotten. But Simon Monk.
Edwards.
Sorry?
Tom Edwards, is it?
Tom Edwards, beg your pardon. Thanks, Laura. And Simon was very coherent and concise and spoke very well at the protest. There you have loads of people there. And as Simon says, it's absolutely not just about that Holborn Junction. In fact, David Arditi made a very good point saying that, at least Camden is trying to do some things. And what really counts is all the junctions which are just as dangerous, except you don't get the attention there because nobody's cycling there, because guess what, they're too dangerous. It's the usual tyranny of numbers thing. But anyway, the point was made, it's not just this junction, and we're not telling off one particular council. And that was a big protest, and we got a lot of good coverage in the media, so well done, LCC. Now, again, this might sound a bit like the Simon Monk fan club, but he had a Twitter thread where he said a number of good things. And he said there's something running. The progress that Mayor of London, Will Norman, and others have achieved during the crisis has been remarkable. It's hugely appreciated, but it isn't just the TfL finances at issue. There is something running deeper than that, and I'll just read out what he said. Lack of political will, as we've heard before, evident in that area. Either way, no sign that there's been any progression on a supposedly key route. Now we are seeing pauses and rollbacks and panics by even progressive boroughs. Could be Ealing, I suppose. And it took DFT getting tough to get TfL to get tough with boroughs pulling stuff out. It is clear that London's a complex mess of stakeholders. It's also clear that climate, etc., mean little to most of them. We need to be far bolder. We stand at a decision point post-crisis. Paris and other cities feel far bolder than London. Unless we start reallocating road space fast now, slashing car use, then a greener, cleaner, healthier, zero emissions London is decades away, if not further. Yet our mayor says 2030 net zero. Time for action, not words. So do look at that thread. That's London, but it should apply to all of you here today. And this is from I'm just putting this up again from last week, what Kensington and Chelsea, Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea have been doing. Do go to their website. Right, now, something that Austin Croydon Cyclist posted about Sutton, some barriers have been declared illegal. So those are barriers on an off-road route, anti-motorcycle barriers, and this went to appeal, but the barriers have now been declared illegal. Go to Sutton or Croydon Cyclists to find out what's happened there, but it's a little victory because there's loads of stuff on social media about there being too many barriers. Silvertown Tunnel, yeah, there's an event from the later this week from the campaigners there. Bad news from Tower Hamlets. That's the official declaration. I don't know the full details. He's talking about a review of the street space schemes, whether it's actually taking stuff out or not putting new stuff in. I don't know, but it does look pretty much like he's backpedaling. But maybe Simon or Tower Hamlets people can tell us something more. And don't forget to go to the consultation on keeping the Lambeth low traffic neighbourhoods in. That's very important. Lambeth's been doing so well, very good monitoring. Do go to the consultation if you cycle or walk through Lambeth. And they did that very good monitoring. Go to that link there. And they've got loads of good figures saying traffic within the LTN's gone down by 8%, traffic within by 25%, and also traffic on boundary roads. And they've got loads of info at that link there, but also on a Twitter thread there. Wandsworth, now the Ashcroft Technology Academy, whose board of trustees is chaired by the former Conservative Party treasurer. They have banned cigarettes, lighters and alcohol, racist pornographic materials, offensive weapons, harmful items, drugs and substances, etc., and bicycles. And bicycles are not permitted because the executive board considers the traffic to be too heavy and the roads around the academy too difficult to negotiate for young people and therefore pose an increased risk to health and safety. Classic case of getting it wrong way around. Actually, although they can ban bicycles on the premises, they can't tell people to cycle to and from school. Cycling UK's got an information sheet about that. And this issue keeps on coming up. And it has, in fact, come up with a primary school in Wandsworth. So this lady says, our Wandsworth Council Primary School has just reduced permissions for kids to walk to or from school unaccompanied anymore. And this is on a road which was previously a trial low traffic neighbourhood, and there's also been a petition for school streets going for some time. And it's, I mean, this is absolutely, this should incense you. whether a child is allowed to walk home. You know, I suppose they'll say that shoes should be made illegal because you might use them to walk home. I mean, you know, talk about getting hold of the wrong end of the stick. It's not about cycling, which, you know, you could say something about that for infants or year 4 even, but walking, absolutely bonkers. Okay, I mentioned this book, which I'm giving nice little photographs from, and here's your one for today. I love this, probably one of my favorites, by Roger Main, Southam Street, North Kensington, just down the road from me. Actually, the street doesn't exist anymore, it's been demolished, but you know, this is 1956, and what happens with low levels of traffic is it's not just the sort of dynamism of street play, but you can see from the kids walking about, the bloke just standing there, the woman in her carpet slippers, that it is really, the street is an extension of the home. Yeah, it's not something which is there for motor traffic. It's been taken over by the local residents. So I'll be showing those every week, and that's it. So any comments, whether, you know, anything I've missed out or anything else? Anybody?
I think Ruth's got a hand up. Go ahead, Ruth.
Thanks. Yeah, just sorry, this is London, but it is yet another example of why there's an issue. There was some time ago, someone drove down a road rather fast within Richmond Park and knocked into a woman cycling, causing her injury. There's a photograph on Twitter of the car, and it's a complete mangled wreck. The police did prosecute, was sent to court. He pleaded guilty to driving without due care and attention. He was ordered to pay costs of £100, fined £150, to pay victim surcharge of £34, and given 6 penalty points on his driving licence. Now, you know, we're also having to deal with that kind of result when someone has been frightened beyond belief and heavily injured. And it's still this thing about the driving is a right, not a privilege, which it should be the other way around. I was absolutely shocked because I know the junction where it happened, and absolutely the driver should have stopped at the junction. So it's very scary. So that's the kind of thing that's also a real issue for us. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, next hand up's Luke.
Yeah, hi everybody. Just I guess it's a little bit of a klaxon. I think Southwark is also consulting on like 6 or 7 low traffic neighborhoods and like redesigns to local town centers. So yeah, if anybody visits Southwark or lives in Southwark or works in Southwark, they're pretty good, and they're all like the old COVID-19 things that might become permanent. So that's also a little bit of a klaxon there.
Cheers for that. Mark?
Yeah, just some side updates from Brighton, or Hove to be precise, that the lanes, Ultron Road lanes, have started to be taken out last night. The Labour Cycles event is, that Bob mentioned, is on the 28th. Yes, thanks everyone. Labour Cycles event is on the 28th, and I know there are a lot of people having a downer on Labour Cycles on Twitter, but they're as, you know, unhappy about it as everyone else. And frankly, the Labour councillors in Brighton refuse really to talk to them or have anything to do with them. So it's slightly unfair to blame Labour Cycles for the actions of some of the local councillors in Brighton. And I think the ride will probably be going to Old Shoreham Road to see what was there. So if any of you are Labour members or around or down in Brighton on the 28th, please come and join. I can't say us because I'm not a Labour Party member. Please come and join the event. There's a long event and a short event. The long event will be a safari looking at things, and the short event will just be a ride to a bar. So, and there are hire bikes available. So please come and join it, and politely tell the locals if they're there, but don't have a go at the people who didn't make the decision, because they weren't the ones who made the decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Labour as well.
Oh, it was Labour and the Tories, yes. And I should just add that the Tory lead councillor put out a thing on Facebook locally saying it was all a PR, because he was talking about, you know, we want the office to look at alternative routes and parallel routes. And he put out a thing on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, essentially saying it was all a PR stunt and we had no intention of doing any alternatives all along, and they fell for it.
Blimey. Adam?
Yeah, just on the DFT side of things, so one of the discussions we're having internally is whether or not, because the network management duty has been updated with gear change 1 year on, but the penalties that they say they're going to give to councils that don't implement these active travel schemes are very vague. I know about the capability fund, but all they're doing is withholding that. They're not. But they're saying general DFT funding. Has anybody got any information about what they mean by general DFT funding?
Mark's probably closest to this. Mark, do you want to go?
Well, I was speaking to one of the officers at Brighton this morning about it. They haven't formally, because what they've asked for is reassurances. So they're not saying what those reassurances are, and Brighton aren't saying what reassurances they've been asked to give, but they've said that they haven't, the capability fund hasn't been confirmed as being withheld completely yet. It's been frozen, but not taken away. So the only authority that's actually had no money given to it is West Sussex, or rather have been told they can't bid. So it's all very opaque what the actual decision-making process is. It could be anything, but I think as was it Adam Reynolds was saying, Roger Geffen's been working on trying to get sort of a different, for the DFT to use its powers in a different way to effectively give warning letters and formal statements and have a more formalized sort of yellow red card type situation rather than just this you can't have money arrangement. Because in Brighton's case, for example, it's £4 million they bid. If that was removed, that would be 3-4 other routes which are going ahead, which have permission to go ahead, which now won't be funded.
Is the problem though with that though? That's active travel schemes, and a lot of these councils don't care about that. But if the DFT came along and said, "Oh, and we're removing £2 million worth of pothole repairs," then suddenly that would become a much bigger political issue. Because I raised that as a concern with all councillors inside Bath and North East Somerset when they're doing some shenanigans with one of the schemes where they're not putting in a trial. Now they decided to take it to a citizens' jury because 37 councillors couldn't make a decision between them. Anyway, I won't go there. But the point though is that I raised it with all councillors that you might be down in Radstock, but that trial in the centre of Bath that they've now scuppered might impact on your ability to get roads repaired in the area, and that sent alarm bells ringing through everybody. But is there anything around that sort of, what is the funding pots that they are potentially being impacted by?
Anything, you're right. It can impact on any fund. They have the power to, and they've said that they are prepared to. But until they actually do it, no. This is the problem with West Sussex. West Sussex never believed they would lose out. And that basically their objection when they got the letter telling them they couldn't bid was to not believe it and write to the DFT telling the minister that he didn't have the power to do it. The minister wrote back and said, "I do. You didn't believe me when I told you. If you did this, I wouldn't fund you. And you can't tell me what powers I have because I'm the one with the powers." But they won't believe it. No councils will believe it until they take away funding for a bypass or maintenance or something else. They won't. They have to see it happen. So somebody will have to be made an example of. It's up to Gilligan. It's all up to Gilligan.
Yeah, we're all getting spicy now, but it kind of like just pay for good stuff to happen is the way I'd like to. I don't like the whole we'll take away everything, because that area is still there and there's still stuff that needs doing. But hey, I'm not in charge. Let's go to Alex.
I just thought to add a little bit on Tower Hamlets. So what happens seems to be all resulting from the difficult politics of the borough. Essentially, the previous mayor, who was removed from office by an election caught in 2015, is now eligible to stand again because he was only banned from standing for 5 years. So the current mayor is essentially just very worried about losing to him in May. And this concern was exacerbated by the loss of a by-election in a low traffic neighbourhood area where the previous mayor, Farahman's candidate, went in hard on anti low traffic neighbourhood campaigning. It seems a really big overinterpretation of the by-election result. I think from knowing people who were campaigning for Labour, and so it seems like that wasn't the critical issue. Essentially, people who voted for Farahman's candidate would have done so anyway. but essentially that seems to be how it happened, which is all quite depressing. Seems to have potentially somewhat backfired. We had the mayor tweeting at 1 in the morning while he's supposed to be away on holiday, somewhat on the back foot due to the number of emails he's been receiving, people unhappy with his decision. So we're doing what we can to essentially keep the pressure on. But to be honest, probably nothing that would come out further before, unless the mayor, the current mayor, wins the election comfortably in May.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, that was juicy. All right, Robin, come on in.
Hi, I'm live from NTN5 today. So some kind of good news from Abingdon in Oxfordshire. So you might remember that in lockdown 1, I coordinated what I'll call a community LC whip, bringing about 40 people together to do a cycling and walking plan for the town. Well, as a result of that, we've now heard that one of the
We'll never know. Yeah, and the answer to everything is...
That's what happens when you try to do stuff outside.
Yeah. Oh,
Only Roger Stocker can do this on Canal Blood.
Look at that.
Oh, he's back. Go on, Robin. We lost you for a sec.
Oh, yeah. So Sustrans have got 20k to look at that. Maybe they'll put some of that out to tender. Who knows? There might be some business for someone on this call, which would be great. And as part of Oxfordshire's Tranche 3 bid, they've also put in for a design study of Ox Street, which is a real nightmare of a street. It's about 10 meters wide. At the moment, there's 2 advisory lines about 1.5 meters wide, but it's full of takeaways and people parking the cycle lanes on the double yellow lines, in the bus stops. And it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone, but somebody killed somebody who was on a pedestrian refuge. The driver was drunk and driving at about 78 miles an hour a year and a half ago. So it's a total horror, and it's going to be a real challenge to redesign, but that's a part of the Tranche 3 plan. Those 2 happened specifically because we did that plan. Only paper designs at the moment, but that is a good starter. More interesting is Oxfordshire still has intentions, Patrick Lingwood, this all comes from, to develop its own design standards. And so I had two questions. One is, does anyone know any other local authorities developing their own design standards? And does anyone know what happened to the national walking standards that were being developed? I remember hearing about them about a year ago, because the inclusive mobility standards are well out of date and need of a refresh. People were working on those, but I've not heard anything since.
Yeah, on the first one, I've got to point you to the Leicester Street Design Guide, because I helped write it. Best in class, that one, if you want a local one. So have a look at that. I've not heard of the walking one. People keep telling me and teasing me. I really wanted to write the one at TfL back in the day, and they brought out one, and there's lots of good stuff in it. There's a few things that kind of clash with other modes, I will say, but it's still really good to refer to until we get a national one. So have a look at that, unless anybody knows any more. Can't see it. I'll move on to, but yeah, thanks, and great for the win. Well done, Robin. You're like
anything on the national walking standards?
I can't see anybody like jumping to it. I mean, there is Manual for Streets 3 that's been written. That's the latest thing that I've heard of. But yeah, and someone's mentioned before on this that walking stuff's happening, but I don't know, and I usually know everybody who writes standards.
Yeah. I mean,
me or Phil Jones don't know. Who else does these things?
This would be the update of inclusive mobility, which is like, is it 2002, 2005?
2002.
We've been doing a bit of work on the tactile paving guidance. Let's go along with that. Sorry, Graham, do you know about that? Is that specific related?
No, it's from a few moments ago. It's when you said the Leicester Design Guide is good, you don't mean the Northwest Leicester one, do you?
No, I'm in the city of Leicester.
Better look it up.
Pretty
Right.
good.
Okay.
Don't spot any
Thanks,
errors. And Brenda, over to you. So yeah, we'll find out about walking. I don't know. Sorry, go on, Brenda.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. I just wanted to plug our People Parking Day. There's a change of date. It's now the 25th and 26th. So it's the end of Mobility Week. And there's stuff on it on social media. I'll put a link out. So it's where we're inviting people just to photograph themselves doing something interesting in a parking space and to send it to us, and we'll put it on a map of different activities happening in parking spaces. It's all part of a campaign to allow alternative uses for parking spaces. And it's the first People Parking Day in London, or it's actually a weekend. So we hope some of you will take part. You can do it just for a few minutes or for a few hours. And just watch out for the information and the guide on social media. Thank you.
And if you're not quite strong enough to take over your carriageway, I put a link out, and maybe I'll relink it to virtually drop a parklet on your street using like a augmented reality. So you can always just go on that link and go, it looked like that there. And I was really trying to like goad people into saying, look how good it looked there in case of that car. And so if you fancy a bit of augmented reality.
That's fantastic. But we're just asking people to do something. Just take a folding chair, sit with a book, and just get yourself photographed. Do a selfie on it. Just anything, it can be something really, really simple. It's volume that we're looking for. So hopefully, if you believe that car parking spaces should be used for other uses sometimes, then please take part. Thank you.
All right, so I think I'm going to transition now into doing a talk about design review, where it's not the volume we're going to look for, it's the quality now. Like seamless. Unless Mark had something desperate to say, I could see your hand up. Is that an old hand?
No, it's just a very quick request, actually. So Active Travel Fund 3 bids went in on I think it was the 8th of August. And some councils have published what they've done. Some councils, like East Sussex, haven't even said whether they've bid or not, let alone what's in it. So I think one of the things we should be trying to do is get a roundup of anyone that knows the councils. Maybe that's something Bob could do, of anyone who knows what the council's bid was and what's in it. And maybe a table of councils.
Let Bob know. Let's save the man a million Google.
Well, somebody should be doing it.
and that someone's probably amongst us. All right, let's shift on. So yeah, but before I start, I thought it'd be quite fun to pull up a few designs and to do a little bit of a design review. So I'm quite happy for the people to chip in. Otherwise, I'm going to point out stuff that I spot, because there's various mayors up and down the country and authorities that get me to look at their stuff, and so I get quite quick at spotting stuff out. But I will say I don't know about any of these schemes. They were just PDF and emailed to me just before we started, so I haven't looked them up. So that is my disclaimer. I'll be talking about the shapes and roughly what I think's going on, but there might well be some local circumstance and context that I'm totally unaware of. So we shouldn't go running to lawyers going, yeah, but Brian Deegan said this, so what are you doing? We're going to do this like in good faith and point it out. That's what we're going to do. It's all going to be positive, but we are going to point out lots of whopping issues. But one of my rules of doing a design review is I won't point it out unless I've got a better alternative. That's one of the ways I survive doing this thing. And the other things I survive by doing is like things like the Healthy Streets check for designers and the cycling level of service. I'm putting down a list of all the things that I've historically checked. As I go, well, that's what I'm going to check, and that's how I'm going to check it. So whenever you meet me, there should be no surprises. So I'm going to try and reference across there as well. And obviously on the cycling side, we've got like LTM 120 now. So non-compliance for that's a bit of an issue. Enough of a disclaimer. Should we get going? Yeah, let's do it. Let's share the screen, and I will do this here. Everybody see that? Well, this is where we find out that all the tools are hidden by. Oh, I lost everybody.
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm just going to move that across.
It's just a black screen at the moment.
It's just a black screen. Oh, I'll stop sharing and then I'm going to share it again. So it's going to be a. Let me just shift this around a little bit. Put you all over there.
It's there now.
It's there now. Right, maybe I pressed it twice or something. So you can all see a screen there. Yep. And we should be able to zoom in. Have a little look at it. So we're looking at this scheme here in Newcastle, I believe. Yep. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
All good. Okay. Can we zoom along? So the main action's all happening over here. I'm hoping you can see my mouse twiddling, or this will be I'll really have to. So you can see all the fun's happening here, but we've got to look at how it transitions onto it. So obviously along here is a completely different level of service to along here where all the fun's happening. But if I was reviewing this, I'll be going, well, this is definitely in the category of, is this cycle lane doing more harm than good? And I'm saying this in good faith. But yeah, so you've got it like how often, it might be that there's only like 4 buses a day on that one, in which case you might be stuck in the exhaust pipe. But if this was in London, or if that's a high frequency bus service, I'd be worried about just taking an advisory up to the back of a bus lane like that. So there's our first issue. And with it being a bus route as well, I kind of think, oh, there's probably going to be a decent amount of traffic on this. So is it enough? Is it enough? Probably looking at it, I'm guessing that's probably a 4,500, 5,000 vehicle a day one. So you're probably not in that category, but it could be 8 or 9 or something, in which case, you know, you'd be really worried about that sort of arrangement coming from the stuff. Things here that I'd never do, but lots of people do. So one is like taking a cycle lane across the junction, which is what, now this is a super tight signal junction, you know, really tight, to the point where it's almost like, could it just have been a side road? It's a car park. Why have they signalised it? That's all suggesting to me that this is heavily congested and nobody can ever get out. Maybe that's what's going on. And because it's just a car park, maybe I can cut it a little bit more slack for the lane. But personally, I'd have a rule where I'd never stipulate that position for a cyclist going past the junction, because it's in like the least defensive position. And any bikeability instructor you'd ever talk to ever would tell you to ignore that and ride defensively relative to what the approaching cars are doing. And unless I'm protecting cyclists in that space, I go full bikeability in my design. People can interpret in different ways, but I'm either, we don't do anything that works against bikeability instruction, or protect people in the least defensive position. So I'll take that through junctions as well. Now, a little bit worried about that. There is a table there, and I'm not quite sure how this works. Coming from the cycle track back in, I can't see evidence of a stop line there, but it's going to need a stop line. And then I don't know when that's released, because it can't go when the PEDs are going, because that'll be a conflict. And it can't really go when these ahead cycling. So is that getting its own stage? In which case, this is a ginormous bit of delay. So I think this all needs reworking a little bit to make it a little bit more efficient. So sorry for the designers on the call there, but you know, the links are kind of there. And then really this is what I see a lot. You run out of space and dissolve to shared use. So this is been the most common issue of the last 18 months. So people have done like a pop-up, so they're trying to get cycle tracks in, you know, oh yes, avoid shared use. But what do we do about this tight bit? And first you've got to ask, are there any kind of geometrical changes you could have made that could have continued that through? And say like there's not, say that there's some like a old Victorian drain, and that's what you've got on this post here was put by Queen Victoria, and that's the kind of width that you're talking with. Then it's like, what do you do then? Well, for me, the cycle track could still go through, but now I'm thinking that, and I know that it's tight in the lane. I'm really worried about the lack of a buffer on the two-way cycle track. Now this is just like a concept drawing, I would imagine. But really, let's say that's a 3 meter wide track. I go, no, that's a 2.5 of a half meter buffer, particularly when it's a tight lane. We've already established there could be quite a lot of traffic going down there and it's already been squeezed. If you're effectively riding that way as a cyclist, you might get a mirror straight in your face if there's no buffer there, if you're passing another cyclist. So always kind of insist on that kind of half-meter buffer. It looks like it's a footway level cycle track, well, definitely because it's resolving into the shared use. But really, we want as much as possible for this to feel like a separate road beside the road. Pedestrians will want it, cyclists will want it. So I'm a little bit worried about all the pink bits. There's like I won't mention who this rule's named after, but like I used to do it, see if I'll just go, take your finger, run it. Every time the cycle track stops, we've got ourselves a problem. And that's like the basic check that you can get your child to do, go, oh, problem, ooh, problem, ooh, problem. And really, we need to find ways to resolve in all those. But let's say we couldn't. Let's say it was like you're super constrained about that. What would you do? Well, I still think there's like subtle suggested things you could do that would like say, okay, pedestrians, watch out for cyclists. There's a two-way cycle track road thing that's coming through here. Maybe there could be some symbols in there, some kind of like a different shade of material. Maybe there's a little strip that goes along the one side. Just something to warn pedestrians that there are cyclists going to be coming through here. Not so much that cyclists will take priority and think they're still on the road, but a little. So I think this needs sweating. Probably my initial advice is gone, okay, we've gone a little bit weird with the geometry here. Could we bulge it out a little, straighten it a little bit, and then weave in there? There might be a way to grab some space to avoid that. Moving through, it's looking good that we got zebras across the cycle track and it's been managed, and it's clearly going into a shared use area there. We go there, nice wide zebra across there, but I'm kind of a little bit confused about what's going on. Look, like, I think that's for cars. There you go. That's for cars coming in and out of there. So I'm a little bit weird around here. There's a few missing stop lines, but I'm not going to pick up on there. But this is a problem. This is a problem for like a cyclist using it. So our missing stop line here will be directing cyclists across this junction, and then they're in a give way. Now, what you don't want is someone giving way there because there's a flow of cyclists going through there, and the tailing cyclists backing into the junction before a movement's going. So you've always got to give priority to those exiting the junction as like a fundamental of protected junction approaches. Yeah, it looks kind of Cyclops exit. It's busy, and I'm worried about the buffers and I'm worried about the whips, but I mean, they're definitely trying hard on this. I don't even mind bended elephants, and Y-shaped ones will get a little bit confusing. There was one in Manchester that got so confusing with this. We did a little mini roundabout for cyclists. Yeah, and the markings are coming in there, but it's going to be difficult to see where the signal poles are going to go in there. But I'll do it a little bit quicker because there's lots of good ideas here. And again, it's rolling through. But if we look at this crossing here, that's the way it should be done. Stop the cyclist for the pedestrian crossing. Great. Let's keep that in mind. That's the way you should do it. Treat it like a separate road. Road stop on pedestrians. I would have expected to see a stop line there where you're going to have another signal thing there. It looks like they might have just done give way, in which case that's wrong. That's just plain wrong. Let's get a stop line in and let's get it in line with there so that when there's a signal post that's related to that stop line, it's covering the cyclists as well, so they don't, because that's kind of saying cyclists roll through a red, which is, you know, nobody wants to tell a cyclist to do that. Not on a government drawing. So here, like they kind of resolved to the shared space, maybe because they put this kind of like a signal parallel thing in there. So there's a few things that are a bit iffy about this as well. So one, if you separate cyclists, it's got to be separated. This is shared. So this is someone who's got confused between a parallel crossing. Oh, this is not too boring. I'll look to see if everybody's like weeping with tears at the job, then I look over. But really, like, they've got confused between a parallel zebra, which are the elephant's footprints, and the zebra going across there, in which case that's usually, I don't like it, but it's usually coming from shared. But you can't do a parallel movement like that. without separating the cyclist movement in there. So this track needs to come round, and we need to have a stop line associated with that and the extra signals. And then if it's going on to shared, then we'd still need at least a stubby bit of separation. At least, so it's all got a little bit what they're actually connecting to anyway. What is it? Maybe this is a big school, in which case, all right, we'll do something. Maybe it could have been a toucan, and we just like pull cyclists off into the shared bit, but make them stop for the actual crossing movement. That might have been decent. Or if we're trying to deal with some strong cyclist movement on and off, where are they going? And let's make it clearer. So I think that needs sweating a little bit more as well. There's a bit of confusion as to what things are at crossings there. sorry if you're here. And yeah, and the usual, like now, we're saying it's usual. All these pink blobs are problems, and they kind of work against the gear change principles. I'm sure when Active Travel England does eventually start, you'll be getting this back with a big red circle around it. I know our friends at Sustrans are doing a great job at picking those things up at the moment as well. So you got to think, well, why is this going? Is it because there's a toucan? Oh, look, there's another parallel thing right in the mouth of the junction. Where's the stop line? Where's the separation? Again, don't really know what that is. In the interim active travel design guide, that's what it's called, in Greater Manchester that we just put out, I put in a whole bunch of standard details for cycling crossings, and Laura's on the line. She listened to me talk to her for about 2 hours about these crossings. Anyway, there's a load of them out there, loads of standard details, and at least 48 different ways of avoiding shared use when you're trying to get cyclists across the road. So I would point them to this and go, which one works best? How are you going to take it? But try and keep the main through route separate. That's the fundamental there. So yeah, lots of common things that by no means unique to this drawing. These are the kind of things everybody gets side roads and crossings wrong all day long, and by wrong I mean that they're not really in line with LTN 120, which tells you what to do but doesn't tell you how to do it, which is why we put some extra guidance out in Manchester go like this. Again, this is a bit, looks like the same junction. Yeah, this is the same junction just on the other side of the road. Can't see too many different options, but we've got a little bottom bit here. Couple of things for bus colleagues there. Tend not to put bus stops opposite each other, because it can, particularly in a narrow road like that, block everything. We've got an ASL with a near side gate. I tend to just not stipulate the position that cyclists enter an ASL, but it's much of a muchness. You're coming from like a fairly narrow road, albeit it has got buses on it, so it could be busier. And then again, a kind of shared, is it parallel or not? I think all these pink bits need reviewing. That's gonna, and again, we've got a stop line here, and then like, where'd you go? You found yourself there. There's not enough space to put a traffic signal post on that anyway. But let's say they do angle that out and put a traffic signal post. Where do you go? Where do you go, cyclists? Oh, you're going there. Okay, if you're going from protected to protected, elephant's footprints. If you're protected in time and space, big elephant footprints across there. That's kind of my rule. If you're not, like, then it's a dash cycle lane, but I wouldn't do that on that kind of movement. When this is happening, you really don't want any kind of conflicts coming in from anywhere. So that's going to be a difficult one to manage. So there's great ideas along here, but there's some tricky bits as well. Should we move on to the next one? Yeah, let's do that. And this is where I realized that I can't see it because there's a big strip at the bottom. I'll just close this one. Hold on, minimize it. Got the next one. Maximize it. Okay, actually, let's just admit. So, okay, Simon, you were going to talk about this one, weren't you? Do you want to say a few things on your slides? I can roll them through if you upload them up like this. So go for it.
Yeah, happily. Just very briefly, this is the kind of big red blob in the middle of the first slide that you can see is the Holborn gyratory. That's patterns of pedestrian and cyclist KSIs from cycle streets, Stats 19 data. the Theobald Southampton Road junction that we protested at last week, where Dr. Marta Kravietz was killed, had it's now four since 2008 cyclist fatalities, as well as a whole cluster of pedestrian serious injuries, etc. But the other thing to note is this is a very key east-west route. So Dr. Kravietz was killed cycling southwards. We'll get to that in a minute. But actually, most cyclists that you see here are going east-west. This is part of what we call the London Boulevard, heading up towards Old Street. And there was, prior to the crisis, kind of 8,000 cycle movements a day here, putting it basically above anything else apart from like east-west, north-south cycle superhighways, other protected tracks. So it's also, as anyone who's stood there for any more time, it's quite an important bus corridor, and it's got an emergency services corridor as well. And it is it's a set of A roads. It's A roads in every direction. So there we go. And finally, the important thing is basically each fatality has pretty much brought with it a banned turn. So every time there's a fatality, they ban another left turn, another left hook risk. Dr. Kravietz was killed with the last left turn, the southbound turning eastwards left turn, which we'll get to. So if you want to scroll down, Brian. So in fact, where that bus is at the top of the screen, if you can imagine that being an HGV turning left, that's pretty much what happened to Dr. Kravietz, who was heading south and onwards. So fairly obviously, I think we're going to probably see another banned turn, and that left goes, which means there are no left turns pretty much left on this. But actually, I've spent a lot of time at this junction in the last few weeks. And what's really horrible about this junction is there's a load of right hook risks as well. So if you're going eastwards from where the two buses are, there is a right turn there, and you will routinely see, and all the junction arms go basically, so east goes the same time as west, and north goes the same time as south. So you'll see eastbound traffic turning right to turn southbound, straight across the path of a massive flow of cyclists getting really irate, drivers saying they've done nothing wrong, etc. Similarly, going northbound, you've got buses turning right. So where the big trees are in the bottom of the screen, that there's loads of buses come out of that, sweep right, straight across the path of cyclists turning south. So even if you ban all the lefts here, I think you're probably, not necessarily, but probably still in the category of what TfL calls critical issues, and now are in LTN 120 as well. And what you can also see, as I point out on this map, is, there are shit tons of lanes, basically, to use a technical and rather rude phrase. We're talking about 4 lanes on the western side, 4 lanes on the eastern side, 5 lanes on the northern side, 4 lanes on the southern side, and a massive tunnel. So if you scroll down to the last one, this is just my very quick Google Maps drawing lines on top, so you can probably see kind of where the movements are and how it all works. Now, to my mind, I mean, we're talking about a junction that's like about 25 meters, 30 meters across east to west, and about 16 north to south. So to my mind, there is space for something here, and we've got, like, from the east, we've got a bus only gate. So east going westwards, there's bus and cycle only. So it just seems to me that this is kind of, and just so you're aware, since Dr. Kravietz was killed, TfL has come back. They are planning a bunch of stuff with Camden, but the thing that they're talking about at the moment, the thing that they've rather foolishly, I think, on their part, mentioned first, is basically an ASL on the northern side of the junction. There isn't an ASL there now. They're going to put an ASL. That's their kind of interim, immediate, temporary solution, is whacking an ASL in where Brian is helpfully putting his mouse. So I guess my question for tonight is, what the hell should we do with a junction like this? And to be very clear, my instant reply is this a Cyclops candidate? Is this a candidate for just bus gating the flip out of this, and just having a load of bus gates and not a lot of private traffic here? There is, just to put it in context, there is a massive whacking core A road just to the north a bit, in the Marlborough Euston Road, but it does get very congested up there. So could we just say, what, this is central London, we don't do loads of private cars and taxis here, we just do buses, thanks very much, is the other question.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one. So like I'll give a long answer here, but the short one. I did a session for Landor, which I gave a link out to. I'm hoping someone will find it, or I'll try and retweet it. Where I took a not uncontroversial junction on the A5 either, and did a step-by-step how you would do a protected junction that actually made it more efficient for everybody, like in a Manchester Cyclops style. So there's definitely options like that on the table, but I do think the bus only is the way. Really, that's always what this corridor's been crying out for. To the east-west, there is the bus only section. Obviously, it leads straight through to Oxford Street as well. And this should be the bus cycling, it's all happening boulevard. And I know you've worked on that in the past, and I tried to help with Transport for London and help Islington out as well. So I know that the plans there, and it's a question of catching up with them. I mentioned some data from the fatality study that was done 8 years ago now, but it was looking at it, and it was really interesting, the behaviour at this junction, and that the female cyclists were kind of holding back and putting themselves at greater risks, and it's worth having a look at that one. So I will say, I think that's a way, and tying it in with Cycle Gates would be a really interesting junction, and I'd be good to go. If we were doing a Cyclops one, I'll tell you the sort of stuff that we do, albeit there's so many pedestrians here as well. Not as much as the one to the south, which you kind of need the new tube entrance and everything to come along. And and I remember when I first met Andrew Gilligan, we were talking about using the tunnel. But anyway, they were the happy, carefree days. But anyway, it'd be about taking these islands out. Taking the islands out is really, and throwing that space onto the side to get space for tracks. What we haven't got here is cycle lane approaches. So that'll be difficult, because you'd really want, if you were going to put a dedicated cycle lane in, to take half of this bus lane, and then the bus lane goes out, and then you just leave in like an all-purpose dedicated traffic lane, in which case the cycle gates could tie in. But if you were to throw in a cycle track with it and take the island space, that's basically how you get all your potential new curb lines. It's difficult with a tunnel, I know, and it's congested, but that's really where you grab the space from to make the new curbs, and then it's where can we put the crossings, what happens. It looks like there's a decent chance of a diagonal crossing in there as well. So there's a lot. And I'm doing design reviews a day, not design, so I'll point to that Landor one. But I'm quite happy to go through a junction. Maybe not this one at the moment, but we can go through a junction and do a live design like I did in the Landor session, if that would be interesting another time. I see a couple of hands up, so I'm going to jump into them. And if we don't get time to do everybody's design today, we can always come back and do it next week, because there's people have sent some juicy designs. So I'll do them in the order that I think they've come up, which is Dave / Andy.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Yeah, I use this junction regularly when I'm down in London, because I'm always doing Waterloo to Euston. So I know it quite well. And I also picked up on the 2 deaths in 5 years at the Vernon Place one. Vernon Place, less than 2% of the traffic turns left. It's a junction which is over 90 degrees and less than a 6-meter curb radius. So in order to turn left with a large vehicle, you actually have to turn left from practically the right-hand lane. And so there were 2 deaths within 5 years, identical. Wanchi, McGuinness, and Peters, the architect friend. The lanes approaching that junction there are squeezed in. You look at the bus there, and the lanes are barely 3 meters wide. It's the same on the approach from the north, from Southampton Row going into, I think it's still Southampton Row there, and then it becomes Kingsway at Holborn Station. There are 2 lanes coming down from Russell Square, and about 60 meters up from the junction, they squeeze them into 3 lanes by making the lanes 3 meters wide. The solution there is to actually make it 2 lanes of at least 4 meters wide, and a central median. Where that bus is sitting at the north end is to put a dividing median, because there is a lot of motor traffic turns left in order to get onto High Holborn. So it goes left, then through Red Lion Square, then onto High Holborn, because it can't turn right at Holborn Station from Kingsway and Southampton Road. There's also a lot of cycle traffic going onto the Old Street route, because it's the Clerkenwell Road, Old Street, east-west route, which is far busier than one of the cycleways, because that is the route everybody cycles. You don't actually go over many hills. It's quite a nice route down crossing at Farringdon. So I would, at the top, as an immediate thing, is to reduce it to 2 lanes of approach. 1 lane is left turn only, and you actually put a physical median to prevent anybody turning left from the right-hand lane.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to be careful about the solution is when it's complex and there's lots of variables, but it's definitely an interesting idea. Just whatever anybody says to me, just generally as a rule in life, the solution is a physical medium. I usually say, I don't think you've been asked the right question, because we've got to think about like the sheer amount of pedestrians crossing and the trip hazard and
the median.
So we've got to be careful we don't go too strong with a hammer on one point and actually create lots of other issues as well, which is why it's a complex junction.
There's room for a left turn cycleway actually in the footway at that corner as well. If you have cyclists turning left on the north from Southampton Row into Theobald Road, there's room to actually put a separate cycleway where the footway is on the curb radius.
Yeah, well, there's lots of things, and maybe we can do a design session. Well, I'm bringing David Harrison now to get
just to agree with Simon. I mean, this east-west route should not be significant for general motor traffic, because the busier motor traffic route is the one further south on High Holborn, which the city has as a city access road leading out to the city westwards. For long, as Stephen Edwards said, this has been planned as the Theobald's Road, Clerkenwell cycling and walking corridor. And I just wonder whether anybody knows what's happened to that and why TfL have dropped it. Any answers? Because it's really not essential as a motor traffic corridor, because you have that motor traffic corridor immediately south, a few yards away.
Well, I think that's got to be the plan, hasn't it, to start thinking about the other modes here, which I hinted at when Simon was going on about that. I think you're on a winner there, but I don't know. I don't work there anymore. Never did. I won't be able to tell you. Anyway,
I think it's like just funding.
Plans.
Sorry, I think it's just funding from Camden, apparently.
But Camden don't have any money. You'd expect TfL.
But there's stuff you can do with barriers, and there's temporary kind of layouts as well. So hopefully they'll have a look at it. But it's difficult when you work in a profession and you're managing this junction. I've got a little bit of sympathy for people, because if you're too reactive, it's like you're acknowledging there's a fault. And that, as Ruth said earlier, this is actually better than the majority of major signal junctions in the UK, in that they have gone and banned turns and they tried to deal with it and stuff. So I know there's still glaring issues everywhere that we need to resolve, but it's exacerbated by how many cyclists are going through there. But still, these are just the common issues, and you're like, well, why is that staggered and why is like that? And we could talk about the ways and wherefores of junction design. And I did on that Landor one another link to how do we get to this point? Well, it does seem to be space there, and it is available, and it would need a radical overhaul, and it would be you'd be spending 2 or 3 million on this junction. So no, we're hard pressed. But I think Camden doesn't know it needs to. TfL does not know it needs to happen. So hopefully we will get on it at some stage. But what would happen if you did that extra ban on the left? What would happen indeed? Go on, Simon, I'll let you come back in.
Yeah, I was actually just going to change. I was actually going to just as an aside say one of the things that I was quite surprised by, and I'm wondering whether this is a London thing and we're just ahead of the curve a bit, or whether this is a specific junction thing or whatever. But actually, one of the things I noticed, and I was just thinking about it while you were talking, when you said about women cyclists coming through slower, the near misses that I've seen at this junction in the last few weeks are overwhelmingly e-scooter users. So I don't know whether they're coming out of the lights faster or slower or whatever, because I was too busy looking at other stuff. But like every time I looked up and I heard like a squeal of brakes and beeping horns, there's an e-scooter user and a car turning or a bus turning. So I think that's worth being aware of, the fact that we've got a changing bunch of people who are using our roads, as it were, as well.
Yeah, well, that's the sustainable travel corridor that London desperately needs. So I'll bring in Luke, and then I'm going to try and do one more design review before the end. But Luke, come on in on this one.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, this junction is obviously just horribly outdated and horrible in so many ways. And aside from having immediate solutions or improvements, which I don't know many, I think it's also just important to make sure that like TfL or Camden have like this vision of how it should look like. Because obviously if we have a major A road that is just north of this, and this seems to be the main, let's call it the mobility corridor for now, then you would say like, okay, we need LTM 120 compliant cycle tracks, like say bi-directional for like both east-west as well as north-south, plus a good protected interchange between those two, and then kind of work backwards from there. So I think one of the things that has worked a little bit well in London seems to be how City of London is approaching Bank, which is like they did some temporary changes, then they did the bus gates, and now they're actually trying to close some of the arms and install more segregated cycle tracks. Because I do think that even if this would be a bus only, or bus and taxi or something only area, then that would still be too intimidating for many people that would like to cycle. So it would protect the ones that are cycling right now, yes, but it wouldn't really encourage a lot of other people to start cycling this way. And obviously we want to have an immediate stop to the road deaths and the road casualties that we have here. But at the same time, we all, there needs to be more cycling in London, there needs to be more walking in London in order to meet things like the climate emergency targets and the mayor's transport targets. So we need to think about the cohort that we want to reach as well, and then kind of start working backwards from there.
Good. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going back a bit, but I remember the almighty fuss about trying to get the contraflow bus and cycle lane in this, which you couldn't actually allow for many years. So this in its current format was a massive win of what was there before, which we have to remember. But yeah, I mean, yeah, major junctions don't look great, but there's more and more techniques that we can apply to them. So I'll leave that there, because we'll go back to do one more design review, and I'll do it quick. And any that we haven't done, I know there's a few more that's come over. Maybe we can pick them up next week. If people tell me that they like this slot, then we can do it a little bit more regularly. It's definitely like I'll just get to the next one. There we go, roundabouts. Here we go. Yeah, now we jumped out of that London nonsense. Oh, what did I do there? I just pressed something mad. Hey, there you go. Stay where you are. Stay where you are, roundabouts. Ooh, click off there. It was like where we go with the tech there. I was gonna, let's try and zoom it in a little bit, see if that goes away. I see. you fickle beast. Oh, here we go. And so we're having a look at again. So let's start off in this corner here, just like a roll it through, doing cycling level of service, and then I'm doing a junction assessment tool style spin on there. So you've got a cycle lane that runs into the back of a bus stop, and it looks like it's unprotected. So yeah, we've got a little bit of a problem there. And then it kind of ends on the approach to the junction. Boy, it looks like we've got the start of some shared use. So it's really like this is like a how not to do things according to gear change and LTN 120 at the moment, isn't it? But I'm not being too harsh. That at least they're trying to do something. Let's work with that. Now, can we get it a little bit better? And we got a staggered signal on the approach there, not the best arrangement for cyclists. Could we again have used that space and thrown it in one side to get some kind of protected infrastructure? Could we get a two-way track, tie them with a bypass, leave this lane alone? Because this bit here of taking the cycle lane around the outside of the buses, I wouldn't do in a million years. And like, I remember we had some refreshed when I was at Camden, naming names now, but refreshed by the side of King's Cross station. There was like a whole stack of bus stops, and there was like a cycle lane that we'd all forgotten about. And then somebody did a refresh and put in this like a 1 meter cycle lane outside the buses, where a lot of buses were coming in and out. And I was like, burning off. What the hell is that? What did that? People thought we'd put a brand new one in, and like within a week we managed to burn it all off because it was such an affront. And here's someone doing one for the first time. So please learn the lessons from London. That's not a good look. That's not a good position to have a cyclist in when a bus comes out. That's yeah. Nobody wants to be there. So if you're going to do a cycle lane, you're going to take it past the buses. See all other options apart from that. It'd be better it not being there than not being there. Can I be more blatant? Sorry if you brought this along and I'm like mortally offending you, but you know it gets like that. You have to be clear about it. Renew the existing pedestrian guardrail. Okay, so someone sent me a deliberate stinger here, haven't they? It's you know, we could see it. Just there's a lot to be done to this. Really, a start from like a blank one, and I think, okay, if we're designing this to LTM 120 principles, we need to take a very different look at how this is operating. And there's not enough detail to really for me to assess the operation of this roundabout and how the lanes are coming through, because they haven't put the lane markings in. They've only really done it on this bit. Scroll down a little bit. We've got a little bit of a shared use, but I can't tell whether there's any crossings. And it's uncontrolled there. Oh, that's uncontrolled across the cycle track, but yeah, all right. You kind of need to try a little bit harder on that one. I think if that came across, if someone came to me and said, oh yeah, we need to get this in line with LTM 120, I'd go, right, okay. We've got some work cut out. And just roundabout design in general, if we were, say that we were designing this 10 years ago and gear changing LTM 20 were just like and the London Cycling Design Standards had not happened, all this kind of thing. There's stuff that you could do geometrically to this roundabout. Oh, what's going on there? Keep putting stuff in there. But just like maybe like re-entrant curbs and continental geometry and not multi-lanes, and these kind of easy exits are a complete nightmare if you choose to cycle through and you're going straight ahead. The fact that you can like apex a turn in one at 40 miles an hour with your driving gloves on is going to be a real problem for any cyclist trying to get from one side to another. So like what those crazy continentals do is have it so the curve goes like that and have a much like a wider radius there and have this curb line go like this in and then out. So the cars when you come in have to turn in, out and then in, which slows them down in there. So there's stuff you could do that would help keep cyclists in a primary a little bit more protected. Well, I think in this day and age, we are looking at protected, we are looking at offset, and really they've got to look at like a kind of Queen Circus approach with hold the left exits and a annular cycle track going around it, or you know, you could go Cambridge and try a Dutch roundabout in this scenario with like parallel crossings. And there's a lot of traffic, but there's a lot of traffic in Cambridge, and I'm hearing good things about the operation there. I as a designer, always tend to press the signal control option because I kind of like to know, but it can work quite well and it could operate and still keep the thing churning through. All the multi-lane approaches are going to be a problem for anybody trying to walk across that. Maybe there's underpasses, who knows, can't quite tell. Maybe that's an underpass, but if you're trying to cross that level, you're gonna have a problem, aren't you? And maybe you haven't. I don't know. There's a lot missing here. There's a lot that they're not telling us about line markings. So yeah, that's quite a depressing one. So we'll pull up some of the other ones. I got a real juicy batch from Dublin that I was looking as Bob was saying. So maybe we'll do this again, maybe next week or the week after. I'm still trying to get Peter Cox in, but you know, let me know if this was useful to go through, and we can do another design review. And just on like what should we do here, I'm quite happy to do a session of like well, here's how we put it together and recreate the one that I did for Landor as well. So anyway, lots to think about. let's jump over. We've used up our whole slot time, so I'm going to stop sharing. And then say, is there any last questions? I've bamboozled everybody. Was that useful? I can see there was something going on there. But we'll jump over to Ruth then for a last word. Good session. Thanks, Ruth.
Hi, thanks. I love that. I think it's brilliant. And I'm a complete non-professional, as you know, but I think it's marvelous because as stuff goes in near where I live, then it's very useful to know where one can pull on expert opinions on what should and should be done. So today is Dermot Hannay, who I think we've had on here, tweeted, in terms of active travel, low traffic areas, transport strategies and climate emergency measures, we need to always keep in mind, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Now, as some people on here know, I sort of don't agree. So we cycled from Chiswick to Surbiton in pouring rain yesterday afternoon, quite late, pre-school run. And Kingston have done some absolutely fantastic stuff. You know, there are sections that are marvelous, they're smooth, they've got proper drop curbs, bi-directional, single direction, what have you. The signage is appalling. It's not joined up. You get to a certain point where you think, well, where do I go from here? And we're experts. Jan laughed about it. He said, I have to laugh about this. What bothers me about this not being, you know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we've got this at Kew Bridge, as many people know, if you lead people into cycling who aren't good at cycling or new to cycling or accompanying children, you are likely to create a danger spot, and it is very, very worrying. And dogleg crossings particularly are really difficult to manage. We've had 2 accident crashes here in Chiswick already at the Kew Bridge one. One person in one of those, I think I've said it before, where you've got a wheelchair on the back and the man on the back cycling and the person's recumbent on the front. Anyway, so I think we do have to criticise and we do have to continually comment when things are looking unsafe and might lead people into real danger. Thank you.